Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me Craig Thompson, K9CT. In the 25 years since Craig re-entered ham radio, he's made a significant mark on the hobby. He's participated in nearly a dozen DXpeditions, maybe more. We'll find out today. He's placed on the DXCC honor roll. He's been inducted into the CQ Contest Hall of Fame. And he's built a very well-known contest superstation at his home QTH in Illinois. Most impressively, Craig has been very involved in the leadership level throughout ham radio. Craig, thanks for joining me.
I'm glad to be here.
So let's start at the beginning, Craig, as I always do. How did you get your ham radio license in the first place?
Well, I was a geek before geek was cool. So when I was a kid, I just had a voracious appetite for anything science or technical. And my dad noticed that and got me some ARRL books about ham radio. And he's not a ham radio operator. He knew the chief engineer for one local radio TV station. And the next thing I know, I got all these books. And I found out that in order to pass a test, you have to learn Morse code. So I learned radio telegraph code from a book, learning radio telegraph, little bitty book from ARRL. And of course, that wasn't the right way to do it. But my mom soon found out that there was a lady and her husband that were both hams in the next town. And we got invited over. So I'm sure I didn't do very well the first time because she said, well, come on over and let's just see how you do. And then she told me what I should work on. And then I came back and passed the test. So that's how I really got in. And of course, when I got to their house, my jaw dropped because they had Collins. And I was big radios and you could hear people all over the world and it was way cool. So that was really my foot in the door. And after I got my license, which if you remember back then, they came by mail. and my mom knew that I was waiting every day for that. And they called the principal of the school I was attending. I was in 8th grade and told the principal, please have Craig come to the phone. I got this. And my mom told me I got my call, which at the time was WN9TXL. And I was elated. Of course, then I had to get on the air and I had put together some night kit, T60 and an R55A. So I couldn't wait to get on the air. And I logged every CQ that wasn't answered because you're supposed to log everything. So anyhow, I soon discovered Novice Roundup because that's what everybody was calling CQNR. And I had to figure out what does that mean? So I think my first real QSO was probably answering a CQNR and trying to figure out what I was supposed to say. So I got into contesting almost immediately. And that same year, I went to a music camp at a university. And I found out that there was a field day that weekend. So I figured out how to get away from the music camp and go to this field day. And what a contagious thing. So that's really how I got into ham radio at a very young age.
So I've got to say that is somewhat of a unique story because a lot of the people I talked to had a dad or a granddad or both that were in ham radio. And it's not often I hear that somebody didn't have that kind of support. So it's pretty impressive. But it also says something about your personality that you're so determined to do this, that you're studying a book to figure it out. Very impressive. It probably is very indicative of what you ended up doing in later years. So you went off to college. I think you got a degree in electrical engineering. Were you still operating at that point?
Actually, you could say I got a degree in ham radio because I spent a lot of time at the Bradley University club station, W9JWC, and that's how I actually learned about DXing. As one of the upperclassmen in the club was absolutely fascinated with DXing and kind of taught us the ropes about how to work DX, how to be in a pilot. We had really not a competitive station at all, so you had to learn technique and you had to learn all this. So that was fun, but I spent a lot of time at the ham radio station. We studied together, it was really a lot of fun. And of course, I continued my university experience after I got a job because then I found out I really wanted to be in business. And I went back to school and to work at getting an MBA and going that path. And so what was really cool about that experience of working initially was that I learned what I didn't know. And then when I went back to school, uh, it was really good to pick classes that you could use immediately. So that was my formal college experience. And actually, before I finished my MBA, I started my business. So then I just didn't even finish it. Because I was so busy, I was working long hours running my own business. So, but anyhow, that was my formal education, I guess.
So after that passionate beginning with ham radio, and then going and getting your degree and your MBA, starting a business, I have the impression you took somewhat of a break for a while.
It didn't take me soon after leaving Bradley that I wanted to go back in the country because I grew up on a farm and I wanted to get away from the city noises and the sirens, and also be able to put together ham radio stations. So I found a place out in the country and put up a tower and actually competed right away. And I fell in love with sweepstakes and many other contests, to be honest with you. And of course, I was chasing DX at the time, so it was a multi-purpose thing. And the phone, back then there was no spotting networks or anything. So your friends would call you, like one ringers, get on, and so I would chase home. So, but until about 1990, 91, I decided to move locations from where I was and build a new house. And that's when I really went off the air. But I had my kids were in school, and my business was really taking off, and I was really consumed with that. So I didn't really have a whole lot of time. And it wasn't until about 2004 or 5, I think it was 4, that I said, I need a hobby I can really use when I retire. And I, thinking ahead, and I play golf, but I thought, that's fine, but there's going to be a time, and I'm not very good at golf either. But anyhow, I thought I should have ham radio and get back into that. So I went out and visited friends my old friends, and I called them back up on the phone, and I took them to lunch, and I said, please tell me where the state of the art is in ham radio right now. And so that's kind of how I got back into it. And I got one of those stepper antennas that was the Monster. In fact, I still have it. And because you could operate every frequency, with that, and put up a crank up tower and just had a ball getting back on the air. And of course, jumped back into contesting and chasing DX. And what it was interesting is I was on the honor roll in DXing prior to me going off the air, and now I had gone off the honor roll. So my first thing was I had to get back on the honor roll and try to get back up that ladder. And so thank goodness we were, nearing a time when you could actually work some DX and people had permission to go places. So I was able to get back on the honor roll again, and which was excellent. So anyhow, that was the phase of time. And I did go off the air for about 14 or 15 years. And I just could kick myself because all my friends had worked them all, and I missed all of those opportunities. But life is life, so you have to do what you got to do.
So I definitely hear this competitive streak in you, whether it be contesting, DXCC honor roll, even your business. Tell me about DXpeditions, because I know you have several listed on your QRZ page. And I should have said in the opener, these are serious DXpeditions. This isn't me going down to the Bahamas and operating casually for 4 or 5 days. Every one that I saw there was a serious effort. What was the first one? What was that like? And why did that intrigue you?
Well, first of all, you got to get your foot in the door. You got to find out what you can find out. I found out that it's kind of an exclusive club of people that go. And they're usually led by strong leaders. And they pick their operators. So how do you even get picked, or how do you even be known that you want to go? So my first DXpedition was a result of me actually talking with my good friend Ralph K9ZO, who's been on several DXpeditions and is a great operator. And he gave me some advice. And so when I knew that there was an opportunity, I made some phone calls to the US operators to see if I could get on the team. And so I got involved with the group that was going to Cocos Island. Actually, that was a great learning experience because it was actually poorly organized. And so you learn a lot. It's one of those things where you go, let's make lemonade out of lemons. And we ended up going there and coming back. But I learned a lot about getting licensed, getting permission to land, actually the cash part of it, how you spend your money and where it goes, the deals you make with boat captains or the owners of the boats, what you need to do with the host country or the host island and to help them. And so I learned a lot in that experience. And so that was my first experience. I mean, we ended up making a lot of QSOs, and Cocos Island was actually needed at the time, but it wasn't rare or anything like that. And then the next opportunity was because of my connection with that DXpedition. So one thing leads to another. And again, this was a really unusual DXpedition in that we went to Midway Island. And the Fish and Wildlife at the time thought that they could just advertise. They knew lots of hams wanted to go there. So they said, anybody that wanted to go, call this phone number and put your name on a list. And so I called and let them know that I was interested in going. And they selected people, and I didn't get a phone call. And it was quietly going on in between. But what happened is people finally realized that it wasn't organized and there was no leadership. And it was going to cost them money to go. So some people dropped out of the original list. So I remember I was actually helping sell a ham's estate at a ham fest, and I'm walking through, and I get this phone call on my cell phone from the leader of this DXpedition. He says, "You want to go to Midway?" And I said, "Absolutely." Well, he says, "Well, it's your chance." And so then it actually got very well organized, and I got a chance to go. And of course, it was a rare DXCC entity at the time. So that was my first. And then from then on, it was like, can I actually go to top 20 entities? And so you can see on the list, actually, I'm wearing this one. At the time we went to Navassa, that was number 2. And so I got familiar with a lot of the great leaders in the expeditioning business, if you want to call it that. And Bob K4UEE, who just actually passed away just recently, was one of those great leaders. And so I was actually able to go to like Amsterdam Island and Navassa as a result of my interactions with Bob. So, but what's interesting is commonplace is that a lot of the people that go are contesters because they have the skills. And so I knew that. So I knew I wanted to stay, really be involved in contesting, because you want to develop the skills to go on a DXpedition to be able to manage the pileups. And so, you have to kind of plan. You can't just ask to go and then learn the skills when you get there. But that's not going to work. So anyhow, that's my introduction to DXpeditioning and how that went.
Well, I think it's interesting that obviously from a hunter standpoint, the person that's back in the States trying to make the contact, we're looking at operator skills and QSOs. And what you described sounds very much like a business startup. You have to have leadership, you have to focus on logistics and permissions, and the infrastructure needs to be there, or you don't make QSO number 1. And that became really clear to me when I was talking to Max after the W8S DXpedition, and just kind of digging into actually getting there on island and having some issues with a government-controlled boat and being delayed by a couple of days. So I think it's fascinating to me that you recognize that early on, and you're also in business yourself. So I think those skills probably serve you well. I've got to ask, is there another DXpedition that's on your list right now?
I'm going on one as a result of going to Sable Island last year. We're going to go to St. Paul in August and September. And we have good leadership there, and the good operators from the prior trip. My good experience, I put it that way. You learn a lot. It's just like contesting. You're in close proximity with in other words, the people you invite make it the success of a DXpedition. And it's just no different than a business. You want a great team and great leadership on a team. People that are able to work on their own, but they get along really well with others. And contesting takes that, because there's give and take. If you're running and somebody's your partner and they're interleaving with you, you got to be able to give and take. And the same goes for DXpedition. Is very difficult. Whenever you go anywhere, there's a lot of hard work. And people have to be physically in shape to get it done. So you got to put up antennas. I went to Swains Island as well at NH8S. And when we went to Swains, of course, you already heard it's extraordinarily hot. And you have to start when the sun rises, because literally by 10 o'clock, you could become dehydrated and ill. And it takes a couple of days to do that. And then once you're set up, it's like you're going to operate right now and you're exhausted. And I can almost remember every single DXpedition I've been on. It's that. And you have to maintain your good humor. And people don't know themselves until they're exhausted. I mean, you don't know that person. It's a completely different person than you think you are. But when you're without sleep, I mean, you've interviewed some contesters that have operated 48 hours and they're goofy. They'll tell you that. They get dizzy, they're sick, and it's an extraordinary strain to do anything like that. But the operations of the expeditions, it might be on for 4 hours, off for 4 hours, back on 4 hours, off for 3, back on for 4, or some crazy schedule that they come up with, so that you actually have the experience of all working all continents or all sunrise and sunset times. And it's just an exhausting experience. Where do you get 8 hours of sleep? You never do. You become this bizarre individual getting along with other people. So it's so when you recruit operators, that's one of the things you need to be careful about, is how you're assembling the team. Are you going to be able to handle the stress of it all? Can you physically do the work?
Well, you raised a good point. I have talked to a lot of contesters, and we talk often about, the 48-hour weekend and how many people are actually able to do that. But people are still doing 36, 40 hours. But then you talk to a DXpeditioner, again, like Max, and you're dealing with heat and mosquitoes and all the work ahead of time. At least if I'm doing a contest, my station's all set. I have air conditioning. I mean, it's pretty nice. I've got a microwave in the corner and a bag of M&Ms. I'm kind of all set. But when you add all those layers onto a DXpeditioner, I remember asking Max, what keeps you going? Is it willpower or your dedication to the team? And I think his answer was a little bit of all that. You're there and you just have to mentally get in the space and move forward.
It's an extraordinary rush to go on a DXpedition and make lots and lots of QSOs. And I'd be lying to you to tell you that after 5 days of doing that it's not a job, because it becomes a job. But the joy of having people to say, thanks for a new one, it's just very rewarding to the DXpeditioner. And, to do these extraordinary things, there has to be a reward and it has to be fun. So you want to make it that. But, the biggest disappointments, I took a trip to Bouvet Island, got to see the island, but then the engine coupling broke, or got on fire. Actually, we had a ship fire, and we had to come back. And I have never had such a disappointment in my life. First of all, you're taking all this time away from your family and your life and everything. And then it's, you go out, you're on a boat for literally 2 weeks, to get someplace, and then have it not happen. I can tell you, everybody felt like they were gut punched because it couldn't happen. So then all you do is think, what should we have done differently? And actually, this is good, because I'll tell you why. I'm also on the NCDXF board. I'm the vice president. And so we interview DXpeditioners that want money or grants for their DXpedition. So all this experience that I've had, and all the experience that the other board members have, really is very helpful. And we can consult, or we can look at what their plan is and their financial roadmap that they have, and give them advice if they haven't allowed enough for generators, or they haven't allowed enough for food, or whatever it is. That's something we can easily spot from our previous experience. And so, like, we've been approached by several groups actually for going to Bouvet again. And we've seen I would call it a success. The team that was there would probably say it was not as successful as they would have liked. But anytime you make still 30 or 40,000 QSOs, whatever they end up with, it's somewhat of a success. But, right now there's another group planning on going, and we want to make sure that they're safe. Number one, because it's not a safe place, as everybody's learned. And that, the whole world is watching. When anybody puts on a big DXpedition like that, it's like the Olympics are on television. You sit in front of your radio for as long as they're there to get every opportunity, and people just sit and listen, because it's an extraordinary event to listen to the operators change. It's primetime television for ham radio. It's really a lot of fun. So we want to make sure that we fund extraordinary de-expeditions and everybody has fun. That's really the key.
Craig, that process sounds a little bit like ham radio Shark Tank, where you have the guy in front of you making the pitch, and you're giving him some advice. That's probably invaluable for them. I want to switch gears. You built a substantial contest superstation in Illinois. What were you thinking when you did that? What was your goal in doing that?
What was I thinking? You might want to ask my wife, what was I thinking? I tell you, initially, I really didn't know that I was going to end up where I ended up. But I just knew that I wanted something better than what I was doing. And I knew that it needed to be at least 3 dB better than what I had at home on anything, or it wasn't worth doing. So that was kind of the bar that I wanted to make sure I achieved at least 3 dB more, please. And then on every band. And then I wanted to find the right piece of property that wasn't too far away from my home and that wasn't as noisy. Try to be careful about that. So I actually spent a lot of time. I talked to names that you'd know, K3LR, W3LPL. I went to NR5M and many others, actually. But those are names everybody would know. They have extraordinary stations, and they've had a lot of great experience. I also called up people like K4ZA, W2GD, who've been station builders, tower maintenance. I mean, K4ZA wrote a book about it, for heaven's sakes. And I hired them to review my plans. And so I didn't make any mistakes. They fix people's mistakes. I didn't want to repeat those. So I consulted with a lot of people and got a lot of advice about the type of property. So you hear you need at least 10 to 20 acres to do what I did. So I bought 20 acres. And it's a rectangle that runs north-south, so that the towers are running north-south. So when you're aimed at Europe, they're side to side, or you aimed at JA or Asia, where the volume of stations are, that they're side to side. Or if they're east-west, when you're, say, in stateside contests, that, again, you got side to side. And so physical isolation between towers is really good, especially if you're going to do in-band operating. And then I didn't mix any antennas on any tower. So if it's a 20-meter tower, it's a 20-meter tower. There isn't no 15-meter, 10-meter, nothing else is on that tower. And I did that on purpose so that I knew that I ended up with a wave pattern that looked actually like what you'd see an antenna manufacturer show you. So anyhow, I spent a lot of time doing that. And then one of the things that great advice was that don't build a multi-multi. I don't know if K3LR didn't want any more competition, but I knew they'd beat me anyhow. But one of the things they said is it's hard to get operators. It's hard to get the manpower to always have the people to do that. So you should consider multi-2 because it takes less manpower. The only thing about a multi-2 is that it takes a little bit more engineering in the sense of what antennas do you have available, because they need to be available at every position, whereas a multi-multi, the 20-meter station is the 20-meter station. So there's some engineering that goes into it. And it was really a lot of fun for me to plan it. And I also wanted to automate everything so that operators didn't make mistakes. So I ended up building a multi-2 that at the same time I can operate myself, SO2R. So I can do in-band. By that, I mean, somebody's running and they have a partner that's on the same band, interleaving contacts with the run operator. And so other people worry about, can I have, when you do SO2R, can you be on 20 and 40 at the same time? Well, you can with filters and proper design, and you can even have the antennas on the same tower. But when you do that, when you're operating in band, you better have physical isolation, because there's no other way to get the isolation between the run station. Otherwise, you can't hear anybody. It'd be just, the band would be just noisy, just a lot of distortion. So, because you'd be overloading the radio. So that was kind of the direction I took. And then after I started getting multis, I started getting the right operators, the teams of operators, and I've tried to keep the same people. So I have radio operators, I have phone operators, and I have CW operators. And some of them overlap because they have the same set of skills or the same interests. But as time goes on, our scores have improved because they become better team players. You learn it's like a basketball team. They first start, they're not as good as they are by the end of the season. It's so every year we get together and we do that. So I've had a lot of fun. I just love operating in person. I really don't like. I mean, remote is fine, but you miss that human fun that comes from being together. And I tell you, we go out for beer and pizza after every contest. We go out for it, and we have the best time talking about, the stuff, or how did we beat W3LPL in a pilot? Okay, well, that was once, but it's worth talking about. It's fun to talk about those experiences. So we have a great time, and that's why I built it. It's just to have fun, a lot of fun, and have the operators have fun. I want them to go home happy that they were here. So I try to give them that experience too. That's something that I learned when I was actually operating at other stations or whatever. I want them to not feel like they're at home when they come. So that's why they have their own bed. We have a kitchen. We have a lot of food. It's very comfortable. And the other thing is there's not a lot of pressure on you. We don't, if somebody says, hey, I can't operate anymore, I need a break, somebody's more than willing. So usually for multi-twos, we use 6 operators, including myself. And we got 2 run, 2 partner, and 2 resting. The problem is it's so exciting that the 2 resting never rest. They're always like right there. They want to see what's going on. So anyhow, it's a lot of fun. That's why I did it. It's a lot of fun to share.
So Craig, I have to make an observation that I've never brought up before, but doing this show, I've seen a lot of photos of a lot of shacks, a lot of contest superstations. I don't think there's any one of them that's as aesthetically pleasing as yours. Everything seems to be neat as a pin. I mean, whether it be exterior or in your shack, it clearly suggests somebody that's in the electronics business that want to make sure that everything is in its proper place. I mean, the guy stakes are beautiful. Was that part of your goal, to make sure that this actually looked presentable for your wife or yourself?
Well, I was thinking ahead to the mowing. That's what I was thinking about. And so I laid it all out, and I got all this advice. And then I needed a stamp. I needed a PE stamp on the structural integrity. So I actually contacted KR7X, Hank Lundberg, who's a PE in Oregon. I believe he's in Oregon. And he had built his businesses. I think at the time he was doing transmission lines and maybe cell towers. So he had huge amount of experience with wind loading and all of these things that you need. And so that's where the design came from, is I have these stamped drawings with all of this cement work and metal work and everything. And so those are custom made. And of course I furnished the mechanical engineering drawings to the people that made it. The cement contractor, what the mix needed to be, what the diameter. Those are 3-foot diameter pieces of concrete underneath them that go down, 8 feet. So they're significant, and so I wanted to be safe. I wanted to be electrically good. And then at the same time in the station with automation, I could put all of the stuff against the wall. And what I wanted is an operator can sit down at any station and everything looks the same. So, for instance, I use Green Heron automation for so that the wall that you see at my station with all the antennas coming in and the switches and everything, that's a server location. And so every station then is a client. And so when you sit down, it's automated. So when you're at the run station, you go from 20 to 40, the stack follows you. You don't need to know that. The filters change. Everything, you get the primo stuff you get the stack. And the partner gets the others, if he's on the same band, it automatically goes to an antenna that will be his best antenna to interleave with that person. So I try to automate as much as possible, because at 3:00 in the morning, guys can make mistakes, and I don't want to be woke up if I'm sleeping. So I don't want to have to fix something. But so that was the design consideration. I want guys to come in and just sit down and have fun. A lot of times guys come in, I have flex radios. They might have ICOM or they might have Elecraft, but it's actually very simple. Sit down and start operating. I spend a lot of time, like this week, we're doing WPX CW this weekend. And I will spend a lot of time. I go over every bit of the station. I clean everything. The software is updated. Everything's refined, set up so that when they sit down, it's working. I have tested everything. And I'm sure other contesters do the very same thing, but I don't want any last minute hiccups to interrupt anything. When they come in, I want to focus talking about the propagation, what things might happen. Of course, the sun, at this point in time, we have no idea what could happen, but you just go with the flow when that stuff happens. But then we have dinner together. That's the last meal we have together until we have pizza together at the end of the contest. And so everybody just sit down, get comfortable, and just start operating. So that's how it works.
So, Craig, you mentioned Flex. There's still a significant amount of brand loyalty in ham radio. Why did you choose Flex?
Well, that's interesting. I initially had ICOM at my home station, and then I bought one of these K3s when they first came out because everybody thought they were fantastic. And I had a 7800, and I forget what else I had. A 7600? No, that's not true. 7700, I guess it was. That was my SO2R station. And so I didn't realize what IMD was until operating 160 contest. And then all of a sudden I started hearing stations that weren't really there. They were mixed products of other stations. That's IMD. And so I soon got my K3 out because that was the breaking point. And sure enough, problem solved. And so I found the technological difference between the radios. And so I went completely K3 then when I built the station. And it's not that I didn't have other manufacturers contact me and all of that, but at the time, I just thought that was the way to go. And then the first K3s, they're not USB. The connecting was all more difficult than they are now. You had to have microham interfaces, things like that in order to do SO2R or any sort of digital connections or, RIDI or anything like that. So I decided I would take a fly at the Flex. And actually the Flex owners came to my station and we discussed the idea of the Maestro. The Maestro was nothing but should we make this or not at that point in time? So I wasn't going to operate a contest with that radio and using software, the Windows interface. I wanted knobs, and I know a lot of contesters had said the very same thing. So they had sketched out a Maestro in my shack, and that became to be what was interesting is we had already planned on going to let's see, what island was it? Palmyra, I think. And we had the very first Maestros made. And they shipped one to me so I could at least test it. And it's production models. And then, Chemo KH7U out in Hawaii, he was helping us with all the gear for Palmyra. And so we shipped all the gear there, never testing, not anything, on the fly. And that was our first use of the Maestros and the Flex radio. So coming back to your question, why? At the time, I just got a little frustrated with, and this is minor, but it just bothered me. All of the stuff you had to do to switch between operating SO2R with a Microham 2 Plus and the 2K3s and all the audio issues that I had ground loops, things like that really bugged me. And and then going back to doing multi by switching them and changing back to the other Microham devices to do it. So with a Flex radio, you don't have to do any of that. It's Ethernet, and everything is done in software. So talk about simple. And I actually do a presentation where I showed the wiring on the back of my Elecraft SO2R setup and my Flex, which it's like, where do the wires go? And you don't need any extra devices. So that was the compelling reason, to be honest with you. It was just simplicity. I was concerned about all the things that everybody be concerned about. Is this as good of a radio, or because it's a completely different paradigm. You're moving away from Superhet to SDR technology. And is this going to be good enough to work? And obviously it's proven that it is. And, there's always this I won't call it a battle, but it's marketing competitions between all the manufacturers. I'm going to tell you right now, there's nothing wrong with an Elecraft radio, especially the evolution that they've done, because shortly after they improved the K3 to the K3S, which a lot of the things that I was complaining about went away. And then the K4, of course, is a superior radio too. So it's just that they all evolve. At Dayton, they introduced the Flex introduced the new 8600. So I ordered a couple of them. So we'll see, where that goes. I know that the capacity of the chips the devices that they have in the new radio that will allow other things, like adaptive distortion, pre-adaptive distortion, which to me would be pretty cool. Although I got to tell you, the cleaner the signal in contesting, that may not be good, because I'm really clean. I'm not going to bother anybody. I'll still hear the guys that bother me, but I may have a really clean signal. So anyhow, that's my thinking. I always get a kick out of all of this. I mean, I operate SO2R even on VHF. So 6 meters is always on one side, and then 2 through 1296 is always on the other side. So being able to do that with one radio, it's half the cost of a K3 or an ICOM or any other setup. So, from a cost saving standpoint, if you want to operate SO2R and you're interested in watching your pennies, that's one way to do it. So those are the compelling reasons.
So, Craig, there's so much more we could talk about regarding your station, but I don't want to run out of time. It really intrigues me that you've been so involved at a leadership level in ham radio. And I'm curious if that was intentional, if you got pulled into it by others. But I know that if I look at some of the things you're involved in or have been involved in, it doesn't seem like you say no very often.
Well, I have to be careful about that because, well, first of all, I do get asked, which is very nice. And that's probably because of my business background. I think almost anybody in the same position would tell you that you've learned how to manage things over time and you get things done. So those are the best people to have on your team when you're trying to do something. And I really enjoy it. I like having my finger on things. I don't like to complain about things. I want to see things happen. And I think you need to be in a position to try to divine a way for the hobby. I think, if you were to go to Dayton or go anywhere, you notice that most of us are getting older and that the average age of the ham population is not very young. And so you're sitting there going, from a contest standpoint, as I'm as selfish as any contester would be, we win by having people operate. And if half of them go away or we lose some every year and we're not backfilling, that's not good. So we need to do things to solve that problem. And some people say it's not a problem at all. Well, I see it as a problem. I think in the next 10 to 20 years, if we don't solve this problem, sweepstakes or DX contests, we may be wondering, what are we going to do all weekend? So I wanted to be involved in that process to see if we can't influence that. That's a big problem, and no one seems to have a real answer to that. But in a contesting standpoint, I do think that real-time contesting has a place, because I think that addresses the gaming interests, the immediate gratification part of our current group of younger citizens, and because they love it. Their attention's short. They need fun. It needs to be compelling. So they're not willing to wait 9 months for contest results. And so we have to do something about that. So I've been involved in a group to fashion a way to get there. And actually, I felt that this past weekend at Dayton, that there was a lot of guys with the same mindset that I think we can get there. But it's early in the stages of doing that, but it's certainly technically doable. We just have to harness all of the horsepower that we have and get it. So I just said I would be willing to coordinate this activity. I'm not a programmer. I know what the vision should be, and I know what and the thing is, at Dayton, you could also see compelling outcomes. You could see, actually, this is interesting. This is where we need to be. This is what we should be doing in order to make it interesting. A lot of new hams are not young hams. They're people that actually have retired, have money, and have time to do it. But again, their interests are the same as a 20 or 30-year-old. They don't understand why you'd wait for anything. So in order to attract people, we have to do things like that. Of course, DXing, being involved with the NCDXF, I just love that, because you're in the early loop of discussions with stuff, and you know things. So I love that. I like seeing that activity. I like that we actually have a youth incentive program to bring along young people to have the next generation of young DXers. Again, we're going to struggle with the same problems if we don't have the leadership people that they learn from other people. How do you get this done? The last trip to Guyana actually was funded by NCDXF, and those were all young people. And now I see some of those same young people are going on other DXpeditions. Well, hurrah, so that's how we're going to solve these things, I think. And I think the medium, doing more stuff like we're doing right now, talking directly to them, this is where they get their information. Reading stuff. I made a comment about this at Visalia. One of the things we have to be careful about as older people is that we don't complain all the time. This hobby is fun, and we need to remember that whining about things or whatever, other people read this, and it's good to give constructive criticism, but to just complain, it sounds really negative. Why would I join all these old guys doing that if they're complaining about it? So I think that's a personal responsibility we each have as a ham radio operator, is to share the fun and the excitement, and that's why we do it. We got to remember that we can't be just grumpy old men. So
I appreciate that your answer to why you got involved with leadership really was mostly about the future of ham radio. That speaks volumes of yourself. But tell me more about that. I'm hearing, let's not be so negative. Let's help fund youth DXpeditions, for example. What are some of the other things? Well, you mentioned contesting also, make it more interactive. What are some of the other things that we could do to make sure this hobby stays vibrant for the next 10, 20, 30 years?
We certainly have to raise visibility of the hobby. We're competing against so many things, and everybody realizes that. We don't see parents picking up their kids in their van on Saturday to go to field day. They're going to a soccer match or something like that, and they're all connected. I mean, a lot of them would say, we got a cell phone. Why do we need this hobby at all? So we've got to get their attention. And there's many ways we could do that. I don't have a magic answer for that. I just know it's a problem. And competing for time. Obviously, we're an interesting technological hobby. And we have to harness that somehow, in the STEM curriculum in particular. We have, unfortunately, little visibility. I know that the ARRL is trying to, train teachers but you can only do so many at a time. You're not training 10,000 teachers or 50,000 teachers, because there's thousands and thousands of teachers and the teachers actually have competing interests with they're pulled so many different ways. Just getting the core curriculum is tough. But I think it starts with the kid's interest. And it's like anything, if you can get a kid interested. I used to think, because I was trying to do some things to get younger kids to own the hobby. By that, I mean, normally what happens is in junior high and high school, when kids actually can see the hobby, it's usually because their parents or grandparents or someone is introduced it to them and got them involved. Then they get distracted. But if I kept thinking, if the universities were strong, the university system and the colleges, and that their club station, that the students would make a decision. It's on their own. They're not being supervised by anybody at the point they go to college. The parents are not involved. The grandparents, if you can get them to the university club station and make it compelling to be there. But what I found over the last 20 years, because I did quite a bit of study on this, and other people have too, is a lot of the club stations have fallen into disrepair, or they've been actually abandoned, which is very sad. What happens is that I found that students that are actively interested, that really want to do something, they will get the station back. But this is so dependent on sponsors or trustees, as you very well know, which are the older people with other competing interests that should be getting the kids excited. So to me, there's ownership when a kid makes a decision when they're in college. The parents didn't tell them, they made the decision. So we need to revitalize that link somehow. I keep saying, I spend a lot of time actually mentoring my college, where I went, Bradley University, and I talk to the sponsor and I invite the kids out to my station. I invite them to operate if they have any interest. But I think it behooves each of us to reconnect with our local, whether you went there or not, just reconnect with your local university or college and try to, foster some interest in here and help. I really think that makes a difference. People remember that for the rest of their lives if you do that. And I can tell you that all the kids that have come out and operated at my station are still operating. They're still contesters, or they're, even though they've got their career and their family and all the other, but they're still operating. So you can make a difference just by touching things. And the other things, they may be missing a radio. Well, give them a radio. Help them with their antennas. Help them, because a lot of them are you don't want them to just have a 2-meter radio for a repeater. Introduce them to HF, and the world, and the mystery of propagation, and all of the variables that make contesting and DXing so intriguing. That's something you don't have with a cell phone. It always works, but ham radio works too, but you got to understand what to do. So I just think all of us have a responsibility. Our generation, we have a responsibility to foster this at a younger age. I don't have an answer, a magic answer that's going to flip a switch, but just think if all 750,000 licensed hams in the United States actually went back to their college or university, what a difference we'd make. To me, that's a challenge that we should take up.
Well, I actually think that you do have the magic answer. I mean, I can't tell you how impressed I am with your energetic, positive, smile on your face approach. And I don't always see that in ham radio. So I think that if more of us actually presented that we're having fun doing this, as you already said, I think that that's probably a big part of it, right? Because we all want to associate, whether it be me at 60 or somebody at 25, we want to be able to associate with people that are having fun and people that we want to hang out with. And that probably isn't the grumpy old guy in the corner. So
that's right.
I think that what you're doing is very inspirational. Craig, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time from Illinois.
Well, thank you for, asking me to do this. I wish the best 73 to everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you on the bands.